simple words echoing between two rooms forever turned upside down the course of human history. "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you." These sentences were very different from the monotonous clicks of the telegraph. It was a real human voice. At that moment, distances disappeared, time stopped, the world shrank. The telephone was born, and now nothing would ever be the same. Tonight together, we will discover the life of Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and mention in the comments which city you're following us from. Now come, dive into the story of this voice revolution. Alexander Graham Bell was born on March 3rd, 1847, in Edinburgh, Scotland. Sound seemed to come with his family. His grandfather was a famous speech expert. His father was the inventor of the revolutionary visible speech system. His mother was deaf, but an extremely talented pianist. This unique combination would determine Alexander's future destiny. His childhood passed in Edinburgh's rich scientific atmosphere. When he was 12 years old, he made his first invention. He designed an automatic wheat husking machine for his friend's grain mill, and this device actually worked. However, his school life was a complete fiasco. He experienced boring lessons, meaningless rules, and constant conflicts with teachers. When he reached 15 years old, he made his bold decision and completely left school. He received his real education in London with his grandfather. Long hours spent in libraries, deep intellectual discussions, and learning all the intricacies of the art of speech shaped his life. At 16, he began teaching. At 18, he enrolled in university. Despite his young age, he was beginning to prove himself in sound technology. Then came family tragedy. Both his brothers died from tuberculosis. Alexander's health was also under serious threat and was beginning to show symptoms of the same disease. The family, in panic, decided to immigrate to Canada. In 1870, a new life was beginning on a new continent. In 1871, he moved to Boston and began teaching hearing-impaired children. This city would become the center of his scientific career. First at Sarah Fuller School, then at the school he founded himself, he was doing intensive work on sound physiology. In 1873, when he was only 26 years old, he received a professorship position at Boston University. During this period, he met Mabel Hubbard, one of his students. 10 years younger than him, a quite intelligent and strong-charactered young woman. She had experienced hearing loss while having scarlet fever. A special bond began to form between the two, but the age difference was creating great reaction according to that period's social norms. Mabel's family initially strongly opposed this relationship. Mabel's father, Gardner Hubbard, was a patent lawyer and had a very important vision. He wanted to break Western Union Company's telegraph monopoly. He saw great potential in Alexander's sound technology work and began providing financing. Thomas Sanders was also providing support because he also had a hearing-impaired child. Alexander's real goal was a revolutionary idea for that time. He was trying to develop a harmonic telegraph system. This system would provide the ability to send multiple messages over a single wire. He was using metal reeds vibrating at different frequencies, and each frequency would carry a separate message. The principle seemed simple in theory, but in practice required extremely complex and sensitive adjustments. In 1874 came the most important turning point of his life. At the Charles Williams Electrical Workshop in Boston, he met 20-year-old Thomas Watson. Watson was an extremely talented machinist and electrical master. Despite having left school early, he showed real genius-level skill in practical matters. He had the ability to transform Alexander's theoretical knowledge into concrete, working devices. A perfect working harmony formed between the two. While Alexander took the visionary theorist role, Watson did the practical inventor job. While working together on the harmonic telegraph, they made a critical discovery. They realized that tuned reeds could transmit not only specific tones, but also much more complex sound waves. Alexander's eyes lit up, because this meant it might be possible to electrically transmit all the nuances of the human voice. However, a great threat was approaching. An experienced electrical engineer named Elisha Gray was working at Western Union Company, and he too was doing intensive research on sound transmission. Gray had much greater resources and experience than Alexander. Western Union was one of America's most powerful companies and could do everything in its power to protect its telegraph monopoly. A secret but extremely relentless competition war began between Gray and Alexander. Both sides were trying to learn what the rival was doing. Spies were assigned at the patent office. Attempts were made to infiltrate laboratories. Technical information was attempted to be leaked. This wasn't just an academic scientific competition, but a major economic war where millions of dollars were at stake. Gray's advantages were quite clear. He had much more experience, had access to the latest technology equipment, and was receiving unlimited financial support. All of Western Union's enormous resources were behind him. Alexander had to work with a small team and quite limited budget. However, he had one important advantage: his unique vision combined with Watson's practical genius. In the summer of 1875, a very important accident happened. While Watson was working on the harmonic telegraph, one of the reeds got stuck. When he pulled manually, an unexpected sound came from the electromagnet. When Alexander heard this sound, he experienced great excitement because he understood that the electromagnet was directly converting sound waves into electrical signal. This discovery was actually the real birth moment of the telephone idea. Alexander had now completely forgotten about the harmonic telegraph. His only goal was to electrically transmit the human voice. However, Gray was also moving in the same direction and had resources that could move much faster. Hubbard was keeping Alexander under pressure to constantly hurry. He was saying that Gray could file a patent application at any moment, and their time was very limited. As a patent law expert, he knew this very well. Whoever applied first would win the patent right. Alexander was experiencing great hesitation. There was no really working telephone prototype yet, only theoretical designs and ideas. However, Hubbard was extremely insistent. He constantly repeated that the patent system protected the idea, and a working prototype wasn't mandatory. Alexander never gave up because hope still existed. Failures didn't discourage him. On the contrary, made him even more determined. February 14th, 1876 became a real day of destiny for Alexander. In the early hours of morning, his lawyer submitted application documents to the patent office. The application documents stated, "Method and apparatus for transmitting voice and other sounds by telegraph," and covered all the basic principles of revolutionary technology. On the afternoon of the same day, Gray also made his own application. However, he had filed not a full patent, but a caveat, meaning a preliminary document stating he was developing the invention. The difference between the two applications was only a few hours, but these hours would determine the fate of billions of dollars in the future. Great confusion and debates occurred at the patent office. Both applications covered similar technologies, and which application really came first became a matter of debate. Gray's lawyers strongly objected, but Alexander's application was filed earlier according to official records. During this process, quite interesting and controversial claims emerged. Some sources argued that Alexander accessed Gray's technical details through the patent office. Claims that patent clerk Zenas Wilbur took a bribe from Alexander's lawyer and leaked Gray's caveat information emerged years later. The truth was never fully understood, but doubts always continued. On March the 7th, 1876, the big news came. The U.S. Patent Office gave Alexander Graham Bell patent document number 174,465. This document would be one of the most valuable patents written in history and would form the foundation of telephone technology. However, victory hadn't yet been completely won. Gray and Western Union received this decision with great fury. They launched a wide-scale campaign in the media and constantly claimed that Alexander only had theoretical knowledge, that real working telephone technology was in their hands. Gray was constantly giving interviews and making statements emphasizing Alexander's technical inadequacy. Alexander was under great pressure. He had received the patent document, but there was no working telephone yet. If criticisms proved right, the patent could be cancelled. He didn't leave the laboratory for days and worked like crazy with Watson. Every failure made him stronger, because giving up was never an option. His determination was unshakable, like rocks. Interestingly, they were inspired by the liquid conductor design Gray developed. They established a needle system submerged in acidic water mixture. The diaphragm's movement vibrated the needle in water, which changed electrical resistance. It was a system requiring extremely sensitive adjustment, and the smallest error could break the entire system. March 10th, 1876. Finally, the historic test day came. Alexander was working, sweating in his laboratory, and Watson had carefully adjusted the receiver in the next room. They knew that in case of failure, all of Gray's criticisms would prove right, and they could lose the patent case. Boston's scientific world was waiting for the result with great curiosity. Alexander leaned toward the liquid conductor. His heart was beating fast, and his hands were trembling slightly. He took a deep breath and began speaking. His voice's vibrations moved the diaphragm. The diaphragm vibrated the needle in water, and a change occurred in the electric current. Watson could hear these words in the next room. The sound was a bit metallic and distorted, but was definitely understandable. He came running with great excitement and opened the door with force that almost broke it. He told Alexander he could clearly hear every word. At that moment, the world truly changed. Communication history was opening a brand new page. Alexander and Watson embraced each other, and both began crying with emotion. What they had worked on for months, dreamed of, had finally become real. However, the war wasn't over yet. Gray and Western Union didn't want to accept this success. They argued that just a few unclear words had no practical value. Alexander needed to operate the telephone at longer distances and with clearer sound. In the following days, intensive trials continued. Sound quality was constantly improved, and transmission distance was increased. Each success made Gray angrier and caused him to bring harsher criticisms. He started official legal process for patent cancellation. But Alexander's belief wasn't shaken. Obstacles couldn't stop him. On the contrary, inspired him to find more creative solutions. In May 1876, a critical test came for Alexander. He would officially present the telephone to the scientific community for the first time at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in Boston. The hall was packed full. Inside were skeptical scientists, journalists, critics. Gray's supporters were also among them. When Alexander went on stage, his legs were trembling. In case of failure, his scientific career could completely end. He carefully set up the telephone, made detailed explanations, and then started conversation with Watson. The hall fell into deep silence. Then Watson's voice began coming from the speaker. First, there was astonished silence. Then a great applause storm broke out. Scientists had understood this technology's incredible potential. However, some were still doubtful and thought this could be a kind of magic trick. In June came a much bigger and more important test. The telephone would be exhibited at the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition. At this great fair, where America showed its technological power to the whole world, he would perform in front of Brazilian Emperor Pedro II, famous Scottish physicist Sir William Thomson, and thousands of international visitors. It carried great risk for Alexander. In case of failure, he would be ruined at international level. Gray and Western Union were waiting for exactly this opportunity. If the telephone didn't work at the fair, he would definitely lose the patent case. When the demonstration day came, a huge crowd had gathered. Alexander set up the telephone with great care and made all adjustments. Emperor Pedro took the telephone in his hand and began trying. A few seconds later, he shouted with great amazement and said, "This really spoke." The crowd went wild. Sir William Thomson also tried the device and couldn't hide his amazement. The famous physicist clearly stated this invention would change the world. Now the world scientific community was fully accepting the telephone's reality and potential. Gray and Western Union were cornered, but weren't giving up the fight. They increased the legal struggle even more. They filed dozens of separate lawsuits for patent cancellation. At the same time, they hired famous inventor Thomas Edison and began developing their own telephone system. In August 1876, Alexander made the first long-distance telephone call. He achieved successful transmission from Brantford to Paris, Ontario, 8 kilometers away. In October, he made two-way conversation between Cambridge and Boston. 2 miles distance was the longest telephone call made until that time. These continuous successes were driving Gray crazy. Western Union had now decided to seriously enter the telephone business. The carbon microphone technology Edison developed was much better than Alexander's system. The Great Patent War had officially begun. In 1877, Gardiner Hubbard officially established Bell Telephone Company. Alexander took technical advisor position in the company, but preferred not to get too involved with commercial affairs. His main focus was to continue technological developments. In July 1877 came the long-awaited happy news. He married Mabel Hubbard. Despite the age difference and his family's initial violent objections, their love had triumphed. They went to Europe for honeymoon, and this romantic journey lasted almost a full year. During this period, Western Union made a very big move. Using Edison's advanced technology, it established its own telephone company. Better sound quality, longer distance capacity, and they had found legal ways to circumvent Alexander's patents. The Great Legal War truly began. Western Union hired the best lawyers with unlimited resources. A total of 587 separate lawsuits were filed against Alexander and Bell Company. Each lawsuit meant potential bankruptcy risk. An extremely stressful period began for Alexander. While constantly doing development work in the laboratory, he also had to defend in courts. Together with Watson, they were constantly improving the telephone. They were working for clearer sound quality, longer distance capacity, and more durable systems. Every difficulty made him stronger because he never gave up his goal. His desire to realize dreams enabled him to overcome all kinds of obstacles. In 1878, the first Bell telephone exchange officially opened. A modest start was made with 21 subscribers in New Haven, Connecticut. Customers could now talk to each other through telephone. However, Western Union was also opening its own exchanges, and there was real war in the market. Alexander gradually began reducing his active role in the telephone industry. He sold a large part of his shares, which in hindsight was a big mistake. The value of these shares would reach astronomical figures in 10 years. However, he preferred to do more research. In 1880, he produced a revolutionary new invention. This device he called photophone could transmit sound with light beam. Alexander saw this as a greater success than the telephone. This invention, the true ancestor of modern fiber optic technology, was far ahead of its time. In 1881, an extremely dramatic event occurred. U.S. President James Garfield had been assassinated, and there were bullet fragments in his body. Alexander urgently developed an electromagnetic metal detector to find the bullet. Tense hours were spent at the White House. The device was working perfectly, but the metal frame of the bed the president was lying in caused interference. The bullet wasn't found, and unfortunately, Garfield died. The same year, he experienced a very painful personal tragedy. His newborn son Edward died due to serious respiratory problems. In response to this deep pain, Alexander developed the vacuum jacket. This device, supporting breathing, was the true precursor of modern ventilators. He established Volta Laboratory in Washington. Here he developed the sound recording device called graphophone. This system, much more advanced than Edison's phonograph, used wax disc technology. At the end of the 1880s, the long telephone war ended with Alexander's definite victory. Courts decided his patents were valid. Western Union had to withdraw. Bell Company had now become American Telephone and Telegraph, that is AT&T, and was becoming a giant company. In the 1890s, Alexander discovered his brand new passion. He began working in aviation. He was doing flying experiments long before the Wright brothers. He designed tetrahedral kites and tried various wing shapes. In 1907, he established the Aerial Experiment Association. He worked together with Glenn Curtiss, Casey Baldwin, and other talented engineers. In 1908, tragedy occurred again. Thomas Selfridge lost his life during experimental flight. He was one of aviation history's first fatal accident victims. Alexander was deeply shaken but didn't give up his work. Pain wasn't breaking him, on the contrary, making him even more determined. He was showing the strongest side of human nature. Never surrender. In 1909, the Silver Dart aircraft successfully made its first official flight in Canada. The aileron wing control system they developed has become standard technology used in all aircraft today. In his last periods, he began intensively interested in hydroplanes. He was designing boats that could move at very high speeds on water. In 1919, with the HD4 he developed, he broke the world water speed record. He had reached a speed of 70.86 miles per hour. This record wasn't broken for exactly 44 years, until 1963. Alexander was also one of the founding members of National Geographic Society. He gave great support to scientific research and encouraged discoveries. The Baen-Breag mansion in Nova Scotia had become his personal experimentation center. Here, he continued working on his latest inventions. The people of Baddeck Town had completely embraced him and began seeing him as their own man. When the Halifax explosion occurred in 1917, he perfectly organized society and helped the disaster's victims. The leadership quality he showed in this event impressed everyone. His last years passed with struggle with diabetes disease. However, he never stopped and was constantly planning new projects. Even illness couldn't extinguish his creative spirit. A very short time before his death, he made an important statement to a journalist. He said, "No person who continues to observe, remember, and constantly ask questions can have mental deterioration." These words perfectly summarized his life philosophy. On August 2nd, 1922, at the Baen-Breag mansion in Nova Scotia, with his beloved wife Mabel beside him, he breathed his last. He was 75 years old and had remained curious until the end of his life. When the news of death was heard, the entire North American telephone system was silenced for a full minute. This was the last respect shown to the voice magician. This is Alexander Graham Bell's story, a tremendous adventure that started from a small laboratory and changed the whole world. Relentless wars with rivals, great struggles for patents, technological breakthroughs, and an eternal legacy. This story reminds us of an important truth. Great successes never come easy. Alexander Graham Bell's life was full of failures, obstacles, and tragedies. He lost his brothers, experienced health problems, was constantly criticized, fought in courts. But he never gave up. He got up again with every fall, returned stronger with every failure. His story shows this. The obstacles you encounter while chasing your dreams exist not to stop you, but for you to become stronger. Failure is not an end, but a new beginning. No matter how big your dreams seem, you can reach them with determination and patience. Remember Alexander's words. No person who continues to observe, remember, and ask questions can have mental deterioration. Stay curious, keep learning, never give up, because perhaps you will lead the next revolution that will change the world. If you enjoyed this inspiring story, don't forget to like and mention in the comments which other inventors' struggle stories you'd like to hear. See you in the next video. Goodbye.